You're tuning in to the Raised by Rentals program. This podcast will contain strong language and spoilers for decades-old media properties. Join us. Welcome, everybody. This is the podcast where we examine pop culture franchises of the VHS era, improv, news stories, and gush like squealing K-pop fangirls about our favorite movies, TV, and games. I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
I'm Sam.
And we were raised by rentals. Mike, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to gush.
Oh, yeah. I tried to do a Kool-Aid Man there and kind of stopped halfway through, so it was a little half-hearted. So.
Oh, man. Sam, welcome back to the Raised by Rentals studio, parlor, whatever you want to call it here.
Thanks for having me.
3 episodes in a row with a guest host. It's crazy.
Seriously. What are we doing over here?
Wants to be on.
We must be doing something right.
I guess so, right? People keep coming back. And I was joking with Mike that we're probably never going to have guests ever again because it's hard to improv. And like I'm always nervous that like when people come on for an improv and maybe they won't be able to, or like it's hard to get put on the spot live on a recording, you know? Mm-hmm. And it's like, well, maybe we should just keep doing it ourselves. We'll get all these guest hosts out of the way.
Yeah, I felt bad on the short circuit episode because I felt like I just kept going like, and another thing.
I love how you keep throwing the Terminator in there. Keep bringing him back.
We got to have Arnie thrown in there. It's become a rule.
Yeah, exactly. Somehow we have to always make sure that Arnold Schwarzenegger and one of his characters, definitely like shows up in an episode every time as much as possible. And
the funny thing is, like, I've never considered myself that big of an Arnie fan until we started talking about his movies on this podcast, and I'm like, yeah, I guess I really do like almost all of his movies, don't I? Like, holy crap! I guess I am everywhere. A big fan. That too.
Yeah. I feel like he's kind of having a moment right now, too. Like, I was going to do some research for our next Arnieverse big crossover episode coming up soon. And so I'm going back and I'm watching a couple of movies. The last time I tried to do the same homework a couple of months ago before we delayed the episode, I couldn't find any of the 3 movies I wanted to watch for free on streaming. But then just 2 weeks ago, they were all free on streaming. And there is a new Arnie documentary, a 3-part documentary series that came out. I want to say it's on Prime, but it could be Netflix. Those are the 2 I was flip-flopping back. But between Amazon Prime and Netflix, not only do they have a shitload of Schwarzenegger movies, but they had the documentary, and then he has a new TV show, Food Bar, and a new movie. And it's like he's got a whole bunch of new shit coming out. And I didn't watch Food Bar yet. It's on my list. I did watch the documentary while I was on a plane. And holy shit, I was like riveted. It was 3 episodes in a row. And I didn't even realize I had watched the whole thing.
Oh, damn.
It's super interesting. And then I went ahead and watched Kindergarten Cop and Twins. And they were both a shitload of fun. I still got to watch True Lies next.
Yep.
And I remember
love that movie.
Same.
I remember not liking True Lies.
Oh,
so
man,
good.
I loved it when I first saw it.
So good.
That's one I remember seeing in the theater and just really liking. Like, I thought it was a lot of fun. Plus, it doesn't hurt that I had a huge crush on Jamie Lee Curtis back in the day, and she does that whole dance sequence. It was like, hey, now. Yeah. I forgot how old I was when I saw that. I was definitely a teenager, but it was, teenage Mike was paying attention. So
like boobs.
Yeah, I was like, ooh, hello.
I had a crush on Tom Arnold. No.
I mean, who didn't? It was the 90s. Come on now.
I think every movie casting director did. But yeah, I remember not really liking True Lies that much when I saw it originally. I've seen it a few times since then, and like I think every time it grows on me. So, but now that I've become so much more of a fan, I'm really curious to watch it again. It was like when we watched Last Action Hero, and I just had all this like baggage of like the critical reception and the general, opinion of the movie, and then watching it years later without all of that kind of stuff in the ether where people were bagging on the movie. I watched Last Action Hero, and it was a fucking ball. Like, it was so fun.
Oh, yeah.
And that's like, I absolutely love that movie now. It's definitely maybe not one of my favorites, but I'd put it up there with one of his big successes for sure.
Oh, absolutely. And it was the same way for me. I remember seeing it in the theater, and I didn't hate it. I liked it enough in the theater, but I remember feeling kind of disappointed because I didn't get it. Like, I was, kind of hoping for a big action movie, and it was a little too silly for my liking at the time. Now, watching it as an adult, and I watched it when we watched it for the show, I watched it with Caleb, and he knew nothing about it. So getting to see his reaction really made the film better for me, because it was like, I get it now. This was aimed at kids. It wasn't aimed at, like, action movie fans at the time. It was like, hey, for you guys, here's this fun little silly action movie. For the rest of you guys that are crazy action fans, here's a movie parodying action movies. And it was, I really like it now. It grew on me.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know how we started talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger. Again, he dominates every fucking episode.
All things lead back to Arnold.
But
it used to be like the 7 degrees of bacon or whatever. We just need to change it to 7 degrees of Arnold.
Exactly.
Oh, damn. That would be a really good episode, like, topic too.
It really would be.
So Sam, you're back. Welcome back once again. Sam of Western New York Horror Crew and Jerry's Closet fame. I was listening to the new episode of Count Creepyhead's Saturday Morning Monster Mash today. And of course, you not only did you come up, but you were on the episode along with Brandon. So that was cool.
Yeah, it was a great time.
Yeah, I'm stoked to have you back to listen to on that show and back on this one as well. In our last episode, we had a ball, and I feel like we were kind of fighting with each other over who can get like the best idea or the best storyline for our installment in the Return of the Living Dead franchise. But that was so much fun. But we made a huge mistake, a huge oversight in that episode, which is somehow we came up with a story about teenage zombies drinking Slurpees at the mall, and not one of us ever thought about brain freeze.
Yeah.
That would have been the perfect thing to brand the drinks too, especially since we wouldn't be able to call them Slurpees or Ices if the movie was actually made. So having a popular, frozen drink come out at the mall, like it's the new brain freeze flavor, would have just been so perfect for the movie that I felt like I had to say it the next time you came on. I'm glad you're back, just so I can tell everybody about the brain freeze.
And if somebody's drinking the Slurpee and then they get the brain freeze and then they turn into the zombie. Yep. So it literally caused their death and then their reanimation instantly afterwards.
Oh God, right.
And then he bite the person next to him.
Yeah. And there's got to be at least one scene where, when you're drinking something with a straw sometimes, and like it gets stuck because there's like a big piece of ice or like something in your cup, and then suddenly you're like sucking nothing. And then, so what if somebody did that and they pulled the straw out and there was like a piece of like pink brain dripping off the end of it?
Protein.
I like how we both went to brains being yummy.
I know, right?
We watched too many zombie movies at that point.
I know. It's like become like a Pavlovian response now. You just hear brain and you're like, ooh, I'm hungry now.
Totally. It was the new Monster High webisodes. There was an episode where like Gulia talks in the new webisodes, and she was like trying to sing, but she kept saying brains. Like anytime she says brains, she like goes into zombie mode, but then like she talks normal when she doesn't say it. It was pretty funny.
That's awesome.
She'll be talking and all of a sudden she's like, brains.
That's funny. Oh man.
Oh shit.
That's one fandom I've never indulged in. But I am notorious, and ask Mike how many movies I have on my list of like shit that I'll watch eventually, because there's just like so much good stuff in the world. But I'm so deep in my own fandom, and my to read and to watch lists are so long that it's like I got to stay focused, or it's like I don't even enjoy myself anymore because I'm too worried about like trying to keep up with something or like watch everything, and then those are the nights when I end up staying up all night binging some show that I don't even like because people told me it was good, and it's like, what do I even do this for?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to keep up.
Especially with so many amazing things coming out, like, and so many great creators out there too.
Oh yeah. Well, I know like one thing I'm worried about with the convention this weekend is I feel like I'm gonna have Mandalorian season 3 and Secret Invasion spoiled for me because I haven't had a chance to watch either of them. And I mean, I'm trying desperately to finish The Last of Us because I'm like, I have a Last of Us piece that I'll be selling, and I'm like, I know people are gonna be like, oh my god, what do you think of the ending? And I'm like, I didn't get there yet. Stop it. Leave me alone.
That's the worst too, when you're like, sorry, I didn't get there yet, and then like your anxiety's kicking up, and you're like, oh shit.
No spoilers, no spoilers. Yep.
Oh God, yeah. That's how I feel like every time a new Star Wars thing comes out. Even if I don't end up watching it, like I never watched like Kenobi, for example, but it's like I get this anxiety about like, don't talk to me about it, don't talk to me about it. Like it's on my list. I'm gonna fucking watch it, I swear, but first I gotta finish Joe and Carol, you know.
Yep.
But yeah, I think this is all a great segue though, because even though we've just been, bullshitting for 10 minutes about random stuff, the fact is, here on Raised by Rentals, we are nearing our 50th episode, which, side note, I cannot believe that I just said that out loud, but we're nearing our 50th episode. And this podcast and the other podcasts that we're involved with the Rad Pantheon, and Mike, you're on 2 other podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
These have given us all a chance to like reconnect with friends from back in the day, right? People we were drawn to at some point because of a shared love of comics or genre movies or toys or whatever. And, for me personally, I live in Texas now. And while I have friends here and like Josh Hibbert is here, but I'm pretty far from the majority of my family and my lifelong friends, physically far away. So podcasting has become how I hang out with my friends now, But instead of like, hey, let's go get a drink or let's go see a movie or something, we schedule recording time and then we let the world in on our weird, wild hangout conversations.
Exactly. Literally would be what we'd be talking about if we were hanging out together.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's the same stuff. In fact, we were just talking before the recording started, like just getting warmed up a little bit. And yeah, Sam, you were like, look, you need to start recording this because we're getting so far into the conversation, just chit chatting about stuff. But it's like, no, this is what we're here for, so let's hit record and get into it. So on that note, I wanted to focus our theme today of a Super Gushers episode where we just get to gush about something that we love about pop culture. It's the opposite of a rental rant. Instead of bitching about the stuff that pisses us off, like let's give credit where credit is due. And I think it would be really fun today if we spent some time gushing about how we ended up in pop culture fandom in the first place, right? Who were the people early on who influenced us, or who introduced us to whatever your favorite thing is, or maybe there was like a book or a movie that was like really formative that twisted your brain into being obsessed with all these like fictional worlds and rad merch, So Sam, I'm gonna put you on the spot if you don't mind as our guest. Do you want to go first? Do you want to tell us like what was it early in your life that got you into being, we'll call it a nerd, we'll call it a geek, whatever, but what made you different and get obsessed with all this pop culture stuff?
So when I was little, my parents had a game store inside of our house, and they would have people on the weekends come over and they play D&D and stuff. And this was probably, I was born on a base in Florida, and then we moved to Ohio, and then we moved to the Buffalo area. And I was probably about like 5 or 6 when they started. And I remember when I was like 6 or 7, I would sneak down and I'd hide under the table and I would just listen to their campaign and just listen to everything that was going on and stuff. And I'd either fall asleep or get caught and then have to go back up to my room. So I was very fortunate that both my parents were nerds. So that definitely, like, my mom and dad were both crazy about music, crazy about games, movies. My mom actually went into labor when they went to a double feature of Jaws.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I guess I was a little late and they thought that might help. But my parents got divorced when I was 8. Another few traumatic things happened in that time, which kind of got me really secluded. So spending so much time by myself, I was reading a lot, comics, books, playing video games. Not too much. My brother played video games more, but every once in a while I'd play with him. But I was a huge reader, and Goosebumps, man, when when that came out, that was great.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, and Fear Street, used to read a ton of those. And basically, like, anything I could get my hands on that was like myths, like kind of mythological, or like classic monsters and stuff.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's kind of the big draw to Monster High now, is because any like of us creepy girls that grew up, you know, loving all that stuff and everything, like it covers like everything. Like, it's crazy. Like, somebody could be random, like, oh yeah, they probably don't have, you know, the daughter of a troll or whatever, and it's like, yeah, they do, and she loves video games. You know, and I think it's so cool that like the webisodes like introduce you to the toys. So
Yeah.
like you're seeing like, if you're seeing like a new webisode and you're seeing like a different like outfit change or a different character or whatever, you're gonna be able to play with that. Like, that's pretty awesome. You know,
It's
that
like G.I.
whole
Joe in the
concept
80s.
too.
Yep, I was gonna say I
Yeah.
used to love that about He-Man, G.I. Joe, and Ninja Turtles. But like, ooh,
Yeah.
although to be fair, sometimes they'd introduce a character that was exclusive to the cartoon, and then we would never get a toy of them, and it was like, damn it, I want that toy.
And then my dad used to like do trivia with me. So he'd ask me like, you know, questions on how to kill certain monsters and stuff. And if I answered the trivia right, I got a toy.
Ah,
So to kind of like,
That's cool.
he was always kind of like testing me on stuff too. And anytime like he found something that was really interesting, or my mom found something that was really interesting, like they would like share it with me and be like, oh, here, read this, or, you know, here, check this out. And speaking of what we were talking about earlier, my dad used to get so upset when he's like, you didn't read that yet, or you didn't watch that yet. And it's like, yeah, I got to work, and I got other stuff
Right.
going on, a house to clean, and animals, and
I got responsibilities. Ugh.
Oh, geez.
But some of the best times was when my dad took me. I went to Gen Con, that big gaming convention in Indianapolis, in 2009, I think. Not quite sure of the year. It might be 2011. But that was amazing. Like, going to that almost week-long gaming convention. There was just stuff going on 24/7. I remember they had a movie theater with like anime going all night. I was watching Van Helsing in there, and I didn't finish it. So as soon as I got home, I'm like, oh, I need to find the rest of this. I need to finish this.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's really cool. It's cool that you had some memories that maybe weren't so good, and you had some time in sort of seclusion where you got, you know, time to spend in movies and games. And while that's not good, but it's good that you had a family, you know, who very early on, you know, especially your dad, who introduced you to all that stuff. That's awesome. Yeah, my experience was very different. Mike, I don't know if you want to go next. What about you? Was your family into comics and horror? And I mean, I know your brother used to like to torture you.
Yeah. It's weird. The horror fandom is definitely mostly from my siblings and my dad. My dad never was like a horror fan, but he always read like tons of Stephen King and Dean Koontz. So there was always like horror novels in the house that I would like steal and go read. So
nice.
With the covers.
Yeah, exactly. The cover art would always get me, and I'm like, oh, I want to find out what that's about. And then I'd get frustrated, you know, like at least, you know, my 8-year-old self, I'd get frustrated that it didn't happen in like the first 5 minutes of the book. I'd be like, I'm only 3 or 4 pages in. Where's the cool stuff from the cover? You know. But no, I got into a lot of like horror reading because I would steal my dad's books. But when I was really little, we would do family movie night, and we tended to watch a lot more genre picks. So a lot more like heavy action or sci-fi or horror movies. And usually what would happen is my dad would pick one, and like my brother and sister would pick one. And then as I got older, I started picking as well. So we would watch stuff like Commando, followed by like, Silver Bullet, stuff like that. And so I associated watching all of these, these movies with comforting times. And then like as far as like the video game stuff, that was mainly my brother. we got a Commodore 64 very early on. And this is back in the Wild West days of video games when you could copy a friggin' video game on a floppy disk. And so like all my dad's buddies at work were constantly swapping games. So it's like we had maybe 4 or 5 that we actually purchased, and then a giant stack of blank discs that we would just trade and get new games.
Oh, those days.
Yep. So me and my brother would sit there playing video games like all the time. And a lot of them were like those old adventure games. So stuff like the LucasArts, like Maniac Mansion, Zach McCracken and the Alien Mindbenders, stuff like that. Or the old word adventure games like the Zork games.
Oh, yeah.
So we used to play that stuff all the time when I was a kid. And like that definitely introduced me to video games. And it was funny because like all my friends had a Nintendo. And I never had a Nintendo, but I got used to playing it at their house, so I always wanted a console instead of a computer. But it's come full circle where it's like now everyone I know plays on console, and I'm still playing on a computer. So it's like I'm still addicted to my computer games. But as far as the toys go, that was me and my brother. Like my brother had when I was real little, he had a lot of the like older stuff from the 70s, like the forget which wave of G.I. Joe it was, but it was when they rebranded G.I. Joe as a sci-fi soldier. And they were still the larger, I don't know if they were full 12-inch, but they had the cloth outfits and all that. He had a bunch of those.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, they had like the big alien reptile monster that they fought. It was a lot of weird shit, but he had a lot of those. So I'd play with those with him when I was a kid. And then, of course, He-Man came out when I was like 3. So, we got into that. And then we would just end up having these like long battles like all over the house with like assorted action figures. So again, it was one of those just childhood, pastimes. But I remember specifically what got the collecting itch was Ninja Turtles. Now, I remember seeing the figures first. I saw them in Kmart. I'll never forget this. It was around Christmas time. I want to say 1988. And I see these figures hanging on end cap, and I was obsessed. I'm like, they're like monsters, but also ninjas. This is awesome.
Nice.
And of course, it was around Christmas, so my parents were like, no, you're not getting anything, And then they just got me the 4 turtles and the foot soldier for Christmas.
Nice.
But I was obsessed with the toys, and then my sister, seeing how much I liked the action figures, got me one of the Mirage comic books, which blew my mind because I'm like, I knew nothing of the story. I just knew like what the file card said. And then I'm seeing them like stabbing fools and like killing Shredder. I was like, this is awesome. And then the cartoon comes along and I'm like, wait, what happened to all the violence? Why are they saying radical and eating pizza? I don't understand this. But, I quickly glommed onto it. And it was like, it was the first time that I had that multimedia experience of like, I have the toys, I have comic books, and I have a cartoon to watch. And I became obsessed with that world. Like, I started reading everything I could get, all the Mirage books. I even bought the, now I'm forgetting the role-playing game they had, but they had a tabletop role-playing game, and I even bought the handbook for how to play the game. I had no one to play it with, but I just sat there reading the rules. I used to go to House of Fantasy and buy all of it.
Yeah. I used to do that with the Shadowrun tabletop game. I never understood the game, but I just liked the lore, and so I would just read like all the player books or whatever they're called, the manuals, and it was like they were. I think I read one novel, which I barely remember, and I realized later on it was a huge ripoff of Neuromancer, but whatever, it was still really fun to just read the game book.
Right. No, that's how I felt about the Ninja Turtle thing, and the funny thing is like I never really got out of Ninja Turtles. Like I stopped buying the toys when I was a teenager, because mainly I was, moving on to video games and comic books at that point. But like, now it's all circled back. Like every iteration of the Ninja Turtles that's come out, I've either watched the cartoon and bought toys, or at least bought some of the toys from the iteration. But as far as like the horror obsession, because I know, being on the Boogeyman's Closet, that's kind of what I'm known for, as being the horror guy. That really is mainly my siblings. Like I said, like we did the family movie night, but then me and my siblings continued on even without my parents. My parents used to go bowling every weekend, and it would just be the three of us home alone. So we would watch Joe Bob Briggs on the movie channel.
Nice.
And I was obsessed. Like every horror movie, we were just like, what's this one going to be? That's how I saw like Basket Case and shit like that, was because of Joe Bob Briggs.
Nice.
And then, years later, when my brother kind of, he discovered girls and stopped watching all that stuff. He was like, I'm too cool for that now. And it was me and my sister. We'd go to Blockbuster every week, and we'd rent some random horror movie that we had no idea what it was, and a comedy as like a palate cleanser. We would just
Nice.
every week we'd be like, oh, let's watch Dawn of the Dead, and then we're like, okay, now we got to watch like Caddyshack, just to like go to bed.
You know what I just realized that I can't believe I didn't put together like sooner? My mom's a huge zombie fan. And I never really like realized it. And then like thinking about it, like she tends to watch most of the stuff before I do. And then when I like mention something about it, she's like, oh yeah, I saw that. And I don't know why. Like she's never openly said I'm a zombie movie fan, so maybe that's why it kind of just slipped my mind. But like just recently, I'm like, man, yeah, my mom loves zombie movies.
Well, see, it's funny. It's like with my mom with the old black and white horror movies. Like she always says stuff to me like, "Oh, I can't believe you watch all these horror movies," and I'm like, "Really?" Like you and me used to watch stuff like House on Haunted Hill, The Haunting, Alfred Hitchcock movies.
So
like,
good.
And she was like, oh, yeah, I guess we did watch that. I'm like, yeah. Then me and Dad Davey would be watching like The Howling and Silver Bullet.
Mm-hmm. My grandma Grandquist watched those old black and white movies with me. She loved mystery novels too, and she got me really deep into them for a while. She was like giving me boxes each time I came down for the summer, and I would literally like read through the entire like box. Like just
yeah. That's awesome.
Well, what about you, Josh? How'd you get in?
Yeah, I was going to say my parents weren't really into like pop culture stuff, other than, just normal things that people were into in the 80s and 90s. I think my dad was always like a big fan, but his fandom was sports, which is something that I didn't really ever think of as a fandom until I was older. To me, it was just like, like sports ball, whatever, I don't care. But my dad was super into collecting like cards, like hockey cards and baseball cards. And so I always thought that was really normal. And in the 80s, it was like the trading card market was pretty big. So,
my uncle owned a store in Tonawanda.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, so your dad might have even probably been there.
Probably. Do you remember the name of it?
No, I can't offhand. It was behind my grandfather's gun store, and it was on Minerva and Delaware in Tonawanda. I can't remember the name of it, but he had sports cards, and he was super into it too. Yeah, and he had the store open probably late 80s, early 90s.
I've probably been there. I don't remember a lot of those stores. I remember tagging along with my dad though, and he would like make the circuit like every weekend. He would go to like the super flea market, and he would go, to all the. There was several stores, even in Niagara Falls. I don't remember the name of it either, but right next to the comic book store on Pine Avenue in Niagara Falls, the House of Fantasy, right next to it, for a brief period in the 90s, there was a sports memorabilia store, which I only remember because the guy who owned it, his son was in my class at school, and so whenever I would go to buy comics, or for a while when I worked at the House of Fantasy, I would always see Ryan next door, but yeah, my dad was always like dragging me along, and I was never into sports. I mean, I would go to baseball games. As an adult now, I like baseball, but as a kid, I think because my dad was so obsessed with it, I was just like, okay, enough already. Like, I don't want to go to the games. I don't want to go to the card store anymore. I don't want to go to the sports memorabilia store anymore. But, we were kids in the 80s, my brother and I, so we were into He-Man and G.I. Joe. And my brother, I remember him being really big into Voltron. And I remember that there was one Christmas, the one early, like, big Christmas that I remember being really excited about was when we got the Castle of Lions and all of the lions. And it was like a shared gift for us both. Like, here's every toy, basically, in the line. And I remember it's because my mom's cousin Billy had been living with us for a little while after he moved to Massachusetts where we were living, and I think it was like Billy went in with my parents, and it was like the best Christmas ever.
Right.
And I loved it, but I didn't have any like special love for Voltron or He-Man. It was just because of the 80s, and we just liked it. There was so much pop culture. It was like you couldn't avoid it. You know, the Ghostbusters and everything, and action movies. But there wasn't any like one thing that really captured my attention that I was like super obsessed with. But you know, I remember being really into the Garbage Pail Kids cards. My dad would buy them, you know, for me when we would go to the sports store.
Mm-hmm. Yep, me
Yeah,
too.
I fucking love those things. I was always annoyed that there wasn't like a good Josh. There's a sloshed Josh and a squashed Josh, but I don't really like either one of those.
I got a slimy Samm.
Oh, nice.
So, you know, my first foray into trading cards was Dinosaur Attack. You guys remember those?
Yes.
Yep.
I freaking loved those cards.
That's so cool. Yeah, we could have a whole other side conversation too about like Mars attacks and
Oh,
and people don't realize that, you know, Art Spiegelman, the first person to ever win a Pulitzer Prize for a comic book with Mouse, he got his start was working in advertising, and he actually designed or partially designed the Wacky Racers and the Garbage Pail Kids, and I think also some of the Mars Attacks, like First Line, like because he was working in advertising as an illustrator.
oh, that's awesome. I miss those kind of cards.
Me too. I miss when trading cards were kind of like a normal thing. Like you'd go to the store for like a soda, or like we would ride our bikes to the corner store, my brother and I, just for something to do. And, you know, we'd spend our allowance. You'd spend like, what, 50 cents on a pack of trading cards and a piece of shitty gum. And it was just something to do. And, you know, it was cheap entertainment.
And a Slurpee.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
And then you trade them with your friends and, you know, hang out. We used to do that with the Marvel and X-Men trading cards. We'd go to Fielder's Choice, if you guys remember that store.
I do remember Fielder's Choice. Yep.
We'd go there. We'd buy a couple packs of cards. We'd go to Brady's next door, buy like a soda and like a Freezy Pop, and go hang out on my buddy's porch and open our cards.
Oh God, I remember Brady's too.
Jerry's closet has so many cards. Oh, Josh, you have Wildcat cards? Because we have some extras of those. It's not a full set.
I don't collect them. I do have some right next to me on my desk. I have them up on my like collage board of like cool shit that I like to keep in my office. But all the ones I have, I've organically come across them. Either somebody gave them to me, or I found them, or whatever. I am actually afraid to start collecting anything outside of comics because I know how I am, and if I get more than a couple, I'll have to own all of them. And I just can't afford that shit.
Well, I'll send you a picture, and then I'll include that when I send you some sauce. So.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. Let me know what you have, because I will eventually come and see you in person, and I'm going to budget specifically to come and spend some money in the store because I want to dig through your comic boxes so bad.
Yeah, I know. But I know if you're in town, I'll hear from you. So.
Oh yeah. Well, it's funny, Mike, that you mentioned Fielder's Choice, because that's actually where I was going with my long preamble. Was after sort of being peripherally into the pop culture of the 80s and the early 90s, my dad once again dragged me along to the sports memorabilia store, and it was at the Fielder's Choice where I saw the Marvel trading card, Marvel Superheroes Series 1, and I asked my dad to buy me one. And of course, he didn't even look at me. He kind of waved behind himself like, yeah, son, I'm talking, But no, I opened it right there in the store, and I just immediately fell in love because I didn't really know who the characters were. I had seen like Spider-Man on TV. I'm sure I'd seen the characters around, but I had never read comics really at that point. The only comics I had read up to that point were 2 issues of G.I. Joe that I bought off the Kmart spinner rack. Just because they had Road Pig on the cover of G.I. Joe number 90, and for some reason I love Road Pig.
Because he's awesome.
Because he's awesome. But I always liked lore. Like prior to this, I think the one thing I probably fanboyed the most about was fantasy novels. This was before like the Wheel of Time, and I was never into the Lord of the Rings, but I read like the David Eddings Belgariad books and the Piers Anthony Xanth books, and I always just liked the lore of like these fictional worlds. So that's what I was into with the cartoons. I wasn't even so much the toys. The toys were cool. I was a kid. I liked toys, but I never had to have every toy, because to me it was I was more interested in the cartoon and learning about the story. So getting the trading cards was like, I didn't know who any of the characters were, but you turn it over and there's this whole backstory. And it's like, at this point, it's decades of backstory about their arch nemesis and how they got their powers. And then there's cards where they're like, wait, why does Spider-Man have 2 different costumes? And when did that happen? And, you know, when did Wolverine become Patch and all this stuff? And I just had to have them. And I bugged my dad. He bought me a couple of packs. And then I just became obsessed with collecting the whole set. And I don't know how it happened, but at some point I realized that there was a comic book store within walking distance of my house, and I was 11 and I was allowed to go. And I went in there looking for cards, but came out with comics, and it was fucking over from then.
Yup.
We have those Marvel comics cards at Jerry's Closet too.
There's a couple of like specific ones I might get, because again, I would love to have the whole set, like just for nostalgia purposes. But for me, it was like I first heard of the New Warriors because they were a rookie card in that set.
Yep.
And the New Warriors became my favorite comic. That first day I went in there, I bought New Warriors number 11. Number 12, which is the weirdest comic to start on. My first comic of a series that I actually collected, not just a random G.I. Joe, but I bought New Warriors number 12, and it's the weirdest issue because not only is it 12 issues into the run of characters I don't know about, but it was an alternate reality story where they were in ancient Egypt, and it was the second part of the story, and I didn't get the first part. And I didn't know. I just picked it up because I was like, oh, fucking, there's Nova on the cover. And but I was so fascinated by what happened in that book, and Wolverine gets killed, and I was just like, Jesus, like, this is awesome. And I had to go back and get more. And like I said, after that, it was like, I'd be at the shop every day. I'd be at the Super Flea. If anybody was selling comics in some random quarter box, I'd spend my entire allowance on it. And, you know, and I just became obsessed with reading everything that I could until I kind of narrowed in on becoming a Marvel zombie until Image Comics came out. And and then I just became a nut. I became an absolute nut after that point. So
I don't really have many Marvel, but man, Marvel Zombies was so good. Everybody was in there.
Oh yeah, the Marvel Zombies comics were awesome.
Jesus, it was amazing.
Yeah.
See,
I
now
love that series.
With the comic book stuff, it's funny because like I just kind of sporadically bought comics up until Image. It was like I said, I was reading the Ninja Turtle stuff that my sister always got me started on comic books. She got me started on the G.I. Joe books, but it's like I didn't collect them religiously. It was just like if I saw them, I'd buy one. So like I might miss an issue or two. And then same thing with the Archie Adventures and the Ninja Turtle Adventure comics. Same way with those. And then the Mirage books. Anytime that I could find one, I would buy it. But like, you know, I had like random pieces of stories, and you know, I'd read what I had. But and then I started reading X-Men. I want to say that it was maybe 89 or 90 that I started reading X-Men. I know it was before the Jim Lee run, because like whenever he did the whole blue and gold team, like I was reading it right before that. So whatever year that was that started.
1991. Yep.
91. Okay, so then it must have been 90 because I was reading Uncanny X-Men, like they were out in space, and like you know, I got the first appearance of Gambit where like Storm was a child and like all this random crap. And then like I got the, you know, and I became obsessed with the idea of variant covers with that X-Men run.
Oh
yeah.
Like,
no. I got
covers could get you in deep.
And that's where I became an obsessive collector, was because of that frickin' run. And then Image launching, and of course Image was like, you know, they were playing right into that, like hologram cover, holographic cover, embossed cover, here's 3 covers for the same issue, you know. Oh, you got to get this issue of Spawn, this one has a special ticket inside that if you get 3 of them you can order this half issue, you know, like all that crap. I became obsessed to the point where I sold all of my old Archie books and my G.I. Joe books and all that at a super. So it's like, well, you know, I'm a serious collector now. I got to get all the freaking Image books. And I regret it so bad because I have gone back and reread those old Archie comics, and I fucking love them. They're some of my favorite comic books ever. The old, you know, Ninja Turtle Adventure comics. But yeah, like that was where I became an obsessive collector, because up to that point, I wasn't a completist in any regard. Like any of the toy lines I liked, any of the, you know, the comic books I liked. It wasn't like, oh, it's a new figure, I have to get it. It was like, do I like that figure? Is that a figure that I can fit into my play pattern? You know, like I never followed the cartoons or the source material. I always made up my own stories. So like I didn't care if it was an important character in the show. If I looked at the toy and I was like, well, I'm not going to play with that, I didn't get it. You know, like I didn't need frickin' Vernon from Ninja Turtles. I'm like, I don't want Vernon. Screw him. Like, you know, give me Bebop and Rocksteady, stuff like that. But
You know who got me into serious collecting?
who's that?
Mike Alvarez. Really?
Uh-oh.
Like
Uh-oh.
I was seriously like the same thing. Like I'd see something, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's cool, I get that. A lot of it was my dad was sending me stuff. So I would tell my dad what I like and he would just mail it to me. So a good 90% of my collection is from my dad.
Mm-hmm.
And then only like 10% is actually I bought, you know, I picked out and everything. But when I met Mike, he was letting me borrow, you know, you were letting me borrow your comic collection.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you kept on sending me home with series. So like I'd come over for the week, you know, we do our sleepover movie, all that. You play video games, my lullaby. And
Yep.
then you'd send me home with a series. And then by the next time I came back, I would have it all read. So you'd be like, okay, here's the next one. And that's how I read The Boys. That's how I read Preacher. That's how I got into The Walking Dead. Like, and I think with Walking Dead, it was like 30 issues in. So then after that, I had to, I started getting single issues. And then I just got the trades for the issues 1 through 30.
Yep.
Yeah, I blame Mike too. I blame Mike too for me still collecting comics, honestly. I do.
Oh man, he's like, read this.
Yeah.
Like, here's some crack.
I'm like a dealer. I'm getting everyone into podcasting. I'm getting
Not that that's a bad thing. I mean, we enjoy this stuff, so there's
true.
love coming out of it.
Yeah, I've resisted the toy thing. You send me toys sometimes, and I'm like, these are awesome, but I don't want any more. I just to back up a little bit, I was going to say it's funny we had a pretty similar like early '90s arc, Mike, because I got really into reading comics right away, and it was just buying whatever I could off the rack. Like I remember I very early on fell in love with She-Hulk because I just grabbed a random issue off the rack where John Byrne was doing She-Hulk and the New Warriors, and I always liked the Z-list characters like Quasar or whatever. But pretty soon I was getting frustrated because it was so far into every book. Like I was able to get the first 11 issues that I missed of the New Warriors pretty easily, but like I couldn't read Quasar. It was 35 issues in, or She-Hulk was 42 issues in, and God forbid I try to read Spider-Man or Batman hundreds of issues in. And my problem is that I wanted
traits.
Exactly. Well, I wanted a whole story, you know, and so what I did to kind of ease my way in was if there was a crossover, well, then that was my chance. Now I can finally read the Avengers and Iron Man because they're doing a crossover, and I'll get the whole story. Maybe not, you know, decades of the backstory, but it was like trying to find a way to find a beginning. So yeah, when X-Men #1, when the adjectiveless X-Men was relaunched in 1991, I had to pick it up. I got all the covers. I fell in love with Jim Lee, and then they were launching a bunch of issues, new #1s, and there was that whole, like I mentioned, like the rookie crew, like with the New Warriors and Darkhawk, and fucking I love Sleepwalker, and so I was never like a big collector of like, I didn't care about alternate covers and shit. I just wanted a #1 so that I could then have the whole story from the beginning. So when Image came out, it was perfect because I could get every #1. I didn't have to worry about the issues of X-Force I missed because I could get Youngblood #1 and read the whole story. And so, yeah, I became obsessed with that. And, you know, side note, I actually learned that the Turtles were a comic book from the Savage Dragon because he did 2 crossovers in the first 20 issues.
Yep.
With the original Mirage characters, and which I thought was awesome. I learned, you know, they showed up in the comic and I'm like, wow, why did they act so strange? And it was in the letters page that Eric Larson explained that these are the real Turtles, you know, and I'm like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the crossovers work, you know, but anyway, I'm trying to go quickly because it's like fast forward to like 1995 and the comic industry, the mainstream comic industry sucked. There were still a lot of good comics on the rack, but everybody knows like Marvel was imploding, Image was dying, the collector market had burst the bubble for everybody, and I ended up quitting. I was in high school and I was trying to spend my money on like hanging out with my friends and trying to get, you know, date girls or whatever. And it was like I just had other stuff to spend my money on. I got involved in other things, became obsessed with with other types of stuff, getting into music or whatever. But it wasn't until you and I met. I had briefly dipped my toe back into buying some comics again, like 1999, 2000, just occasionally. And yeah, I was buying trade paperbacks. I bought the Marvels by Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross and the first Astro City. But when Mike, you and I met, we started by talking about comics. And one of these days we'll tell that whole origin story. But the point is that you were like, oh, here, take Preacher. I have all the trades, and Johnny the Homicidal Maniac, or The Adventures of Barry Ween, or Dork, or whatever. Like you had, and you were just lending me stuff, and it was seeing that there were books out there that weren't just Marvel, DC, Image superheroes. Like there was all this other stuff that was but even still published by DC, like easy to find, easy to get in a comic book store. And that's when I was like, oh well. Part 2 of it's fucking on now.
House of Mystery.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
I forgot about House of Mystery.
Oh yeah, they did a really cool relaunch of that.
Yeah.
Like 10 or 15 years ago now, but it was so good. But yeah, so we all blame Mike. Mike, it's all your fault. We're all broke because of you.
Mike, we love you.
I'm still gonna push whatever crazy thing I'm into next.
This episode was supposed to be about us, giving the origin story of how we got into pop culture fandom, and really, this is just us exposing Mike for being a dealer and a pusher.
Call in, let us know your Mike stories.
Exactly. The lines are open. Listeners, call in.
It's funny too, because Josh, I remember when you and I first started hanging out. Like one of our very first conversations was very heavily about comic books. And like the next time we saw each other, I can't remember if I had just gone to House of Fantasy or if I just had my stuff in my bag with me. But I remember like showing you a bunch of single issue comics, and we were just like chatting about books, and I was telling you about like what I wanted to make. And then that kind of like, snowballed into the whole comic thing, which again, we one day will talk about. But yeah. I do vividly remember like sitting at Denny's with like a pile of comic books. Like, look at this one. Oh, check this out. This is awesome.
Yeah. I don't remember that exact moment because there were several times that happened where, you would it was just like take a big stack of comics out of your bag, or look at this shit, like look at this, look at Squee or whatever, all that early 2000s like slave labor goth stuff was like Gloom Cookie and all that shit. That was all super popular, and I never really got into it that much, but again it was just a gateway into shit. They make comics like this now, like that's so cool, And I had read some underground comics when I was younger because I did work at the House of Fantasy comic book store when I was 15, and the owner was the same as you. He was just pushing shit on me. Paul would just be like, oh, you have to read this. In fact, he would tell me like, you can't work here if you haven't read Cerebus and Mouse and Baker Street and Miracle Man. It's like, and so he was always pushing this stuff on me. And some of it was like, I didn't fucking get Cerebus when I was 15. Like it made no sense to me. I was like, this is so weird, So I knew about underground comics, but it wasn't until you showed me all this stuff that was easy to find. And that was what was a revelation to me. It was like, oh, I don't have to go digging through some weird back issue bin or like know a guy who knows a guy. Like I can just go to any store and buy these. Like, this is so cool.
Yeah, remember for horror movies where we used to have to go to a specific place to like hunt them down, like Mondo Videos?
Oh my God.
To get like that underground good stuff that was coming out. You really had to hunt that shit down. Or someone made a copy, or their brother's uncle made a copy. And then
all grainy.
It. Yeah. Sorry, Josh.
No, that's exactly the same. Yeah, exactly the same thing. There was a certain period where you kind of had to know a guy who had a movie taped on VHS, or like I never saw the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comics. To get back to that, like I knew that they came out from like Mirage, for example. I never saw one in person because it was like you had to know a guy who had those in his collection. You couldn't just walk into any old store and like find him in the back issues. So I think part of that is lost in fandom. It still exists to a certain degree. Like there's still those dark corners you have to dig through to find the weird shit. But I think it's cool now that so many things are so much more accessible, and a lot of creators are going back now and re-releasing, old movies, and now they're coming out in like digital remasters or old comics. Suddenly everyone's putting out a fucking omnibus on Kickstarter for every weird underground comic from the 90s that you never thought you'd see again. I think right now we're living in a heyday.
Yeah. But it's so much, like we were saying earlier, it's just like it's so much to consume that like there's
Yeah.
no way you're gonna possibly be able to like consume everything that you're interested in. You got to kind of
That's
pick and choose.
that's one of the biggest problems I face on a very regular basis, because you figure most of my free time is spent doing podcasts these days. Like, between this and Count Creepy Head and Boogeyman's Closet, like I'm always planning something or recording something. So like a lot of my movies are like what I consume movie wise are stuff I have to watch for this show and Boogeyman's Closet. And then like, I have stuff I want to read. I have stuff that I have to work on, like for art projects. So I have all my other little side hustles going on. Then I, work 40 hours a week. I'm a dad, so there's like all these other
Yep.
things vying for my time. This is why I still have video games that I've purchased in January and February that aren't done yet. Like I started playing them and like, I'll get back to them. Well, one of these days I'll have time. But it's hard
Yep.
to try to consume everything that you want. Or like I was saying at the start of this, like trying to like catch up on The Last of Us before the Comic-Con, because I'm like, don't spoil it. It's like it's been
Yep.
done for months, but my ass hasn't gotten around to it.
Yeah,
Josh, I
and
was
then
gonna
people
say,
don't have an understanding for that, You get people that are like, "Well, are you serious? Are you really a fan then?" Or like, "Are you really
yeah,
taking this serious and stuff?" And it's like, "No, you got other stuff going on in your life."
like I'm taking my life serious, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
my fandoms I enjoy, but yeah, no, the
Yeah.
people that obsess with it, like they have to watch it immediately. Like one of the things I absolutely hate is feeling like I have to rush out and watch a movie or it's going to get spoiled for me. Like I really, really wanted to see Across the Spider-Verse, so that I was already chomping at the bit to see, but I didn't get to see it for like I think it was like 4 days that it was out for. And for those 4 days, I was getting asked by so many people, "Did you watch it yet? Did you see it yet? Did you see? Oh my god, you got to know this one part." And it's like, no, shut up, no. And I'm like, I'm dodging spoilers. I'm like, just
Hmm.
don't talk
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah.
I
Well,
Yeah.
hate.
well, you can go back in the Rainsman Rentals archive. Our 10th episode ever, we did a rental rant on spoiler alert, asshole. That was the
Yep.
whole.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Totally. That was a good one.
But I was gonna say real quick, Josh, when you had mentioned Paul pushing stuff as well,
Hmm.
he did that to me constantly, which is how I got into so many different books. Because when I first went back to the House of Fantasy after I quit comics when I was about 12 or 13, and would only buy like an occasional like Spawn book. Like if I saw Spawn on the spinner rack, I'm like, yeah, I'll get that. So I was like, because I still loved the character, but like I had no idea what the hell was going on for years. What with his storyline. But then in the late 90s, I decided, dude, I got a weird bug up my ass. I'm going to draw a comic book because I was insane, apparently. And so I started going and buying books. And it's like, I'm looking, again, at what I used to collect. I started rereading Spawn and getting Curse of Spawn and buying those, like, you remember when Walmart used to do the bag of comics for like $2? And
Oh,
it was
yeah.
Mhm.
like a bunch of random like X Factor, Iron Man, Silver Surfer, shit like that. I was buying those. But then I discovered Lenore, the cute little dead girl by Roman
Yeah.
Dirge.
Love it.
And that made me go, "Oh, I can totally fucking draw a comic book. Like I'm going to do this," because like I didn't know, like it didn't have to be like all, big pecs, big guns, big capes. Like it could be something cool. And so I started reading the slave labor stuff. So I went to House of Fantasy looking specifically for Johnny the Homicidal Maniac. Because I had bought issue 1 at Hot Topic. I was like, "Oh, look
Everyone
at
in the
this."
90s.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he was
Got to
like, "Oh
start
yeah."
somewhere.
He's like, "I don't have it in the store, but I can special order it for you." And then he would start recommending other stuff for me. And like he was trying to kind of stay away from superheroes, but recommending random, weird sci-fi and horror stuff. That's how I started getting the Avatar books, like
Mm.
Strange Kiss, all those kind of
Yeah.
things.
Oh, yeah. Love them.
Because
Oh,
of Paul. And I'll never forget, I went to House of Fantasy with Kara one time. It was right after my birthday, and she was like, "I'm gonna buy you something for your birthday. What do you want?" And I'm like, "I don't know." She's like, "Well, let's go get you a comic book or something." So I'm like, "Okay." So we went to the comic book store, and Paul is pushing Preacher hard. He's like, "You need to read Preacher." And
Hmm.
I was like, it's like a $15 trade. I didn't want to. I was like, I was just gonna get a comic book for my birthday. I don't want to ask my friend to buy that. So she was like, no, and she grabbed it. She was like, I'm buying it for you. And then Paul's like, oh my God, oh, you're gonna love it. It's got everything. It's got assassins. It's got vampires. There's chicken fucking. And I'm like, why was that one of the selling points?
Yeah. Well, he knew Paul.
Yeah. That's one of those things where I'm like, it was enough intrigue where I'm like, how does chicken fucking work in with vampires and assassins? Well, I guess I gotta read it now. So.
Oh yeah,
But,
I don't remember what issue it was, but I remember when he was telling me to read Miracle Man. He told me the cool story about how Alan Moore like brought this old character back and reinvented it for like the 90s, and it was super like dark and realistic and gory, like pre-Watchmen. But the thing that he sold me on was not the original storyline, but it was, I think, the second storyline when Rick Veitch takes over the artwork. He's like, oh, it's the most realistic depiction of childbirth you're ever going to see in a comic. They just really zoom in there. You can see the head coming out. It's crowning. It's like so gory and disgusting. Check this out. And I'm like, I'm 15. Like, what the hell?
It sounds like describing a Cross comic to someone.
Oh my God. Oh, I've tried to describe Cross to people. I'm like, I feel dirty.
Yeah, you just need to see.
Oh my God. Or any of Garth Ennis's weird old jokes.
True.
Yeah. Garth Ennis, he built his whole career on like, how gross and over the top can I go?
Yeah, definitely.
You remember his comic A Couple of Dicks, the two detectives,
yes.
and how does it still have all the bad ideas for superheroes like in the back?
The Abortionator? Hell yeah.
Yes, yes, that's what I was thinking of.
Oh my gosh, I have to look at my copy now.
Yeah.
Oh my
God. I have one of the trade paperbacks. It's been reprinted a couple of times. I have the black and white trade paperback. I want to get the color one of these days. But yeah, I love that book. It was that's what he was all about. He came out with Preacher, and Preacher was so over the top. And then you like look up his bibliography, and it's like Bloody Mary and Dix, and he did a couple of like kind of straightforward books. But so much of what he was doing was just like, how in your face and over the top and extreme can I get away with?
I would go to the comic store and specifically look for his stuff, and anything I could find, I'd pick up.
Garth Ennis and Warren Ellis. Those were the two.
Alan Moore was the other one for me. Anything Alan Moore, it's like, okay, give it to me.
Yep.
Yeah. I used to ingest Warren Ellis like it was crack, man. Especially with Transmetropolitan, and then he did a whole series of books at Avatar, and he bounced around publishers. He would go to a publisher and like put out a whole line of books every couple of years, and that was always really exciting. I have a shitload of his stuff in my collection. Should I still read his? I still read his email newsletter every week.
He's awesome. Well, he even did the frickin' G.I. Joe Resolute cartoon for Adult Swim. That was one of the coolest G.I. Joe things I've ever seen in my life.
Yeah. And Castlevania on Netflix.
That's right. Oh, I forgot he did that. That's right. Yeah. But one of my favorite Warren Ellis things ever is Crooked Little Vein. I cannot recommend that book enough. It is so fucking funny.
It is. So
my God. Like I remember when I borrowed it from my buddy Mike at the hospital. He was like, oh yeah. He goes, you need to read this. Check it out. So I was like, all right, cool. I figured I'll read a chapter or two before bed. I started reading it. I got up out of bed so I wouldn't disturb Jess when she came to bed, and went and sat downstairs the entire night. This is back when I used to work one day shift a week. So it was like I had to get up for a day shift, and I'm reading at like 3 a.m. Like, I got to finish this book. I can't put it down. I read the whole fucking book.
Yeah. Dude, I had almost the same story. I'm a slow reader, actually, which sucks because I read so many comics. But yeah, it took me 2 or 3 sittings, but that's way faster than anything else that I've ever read. It has one of those chapters that's like, it's a gimmick chapter where it's like one sentence, but it's like one of the cleverest ideas for like a sex scene ever. Right after you're reading some of the most horrible shit you've ever heard of, and then he's like, we'll be real demure with the sex scene, And Crooked Little Veins great. I remember him telling a story in his newsletter about how he had switched agents, and he was still exclusively writing comics and occasionally doing stuff for like TV and movies, like script work. But his agent was really, really pushing him to write more prose, because he used to do these like quick short stories in his email newsletter as just like practice, and she was like, I love your prose, you got to give me a novel, I'll be your agent no matter what, but I know a shitload of people, in like the traditional publishing market, that's where I came from, blah blah blah. And he basically was like trying to get her to leave him alone because he didn't want to write a novel. He wasn't interested. So she kept pestering him. So he would send her these ideas, like these elevator pitches of just the worst shit he could possibly come up with, ranging from just a terrible idea for a book to, I'm going to go on the internet and find the grossest, darkest, deepest, nastiest corner of the internet. And I'm going to tell her, I want to write a novel about this shit. And thinking that he would scare her away. But she was so into it and, thought it was such an amazing idea that nobody else would do that. And so he was like, well, shit, give me the book deal advance. Let's go. And you can definitely see it when you read that. Yeah, definitely. He put it all in there. He did his research. That's for sure.
Oh, he's got some of those chapters. Holy hell. There's some weird stuff. Do you remember Bad Worlds?
Oh yeah, he did.
Yeah.
That was that his? He did Bad World and Bad Signal. Bad Signal was like his emails that he had like illustrated, right? And Bad World, I think, was like pinups, and then he would write like weird shit like captions for him. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, and it was weird shit that actually happened.
That's what it was.
So it was like there was the one that sticks in my brain is the guy who died. There was an avalanche that fell on him, and when they took the rocks off of him and found his body, he had his dick in a chicken that was also under him.
Oh God!
He had been fucking a chicken so vigorously that he caused an avalanche. He was in a little ravine. And, I'll never forget that because the drawing was awful. But reading about that and then going, wait, because in the back he's like, all of these are based on true stories, and I'm like, oh God, so. But
I'm trying not to stand up and look at that.
Right. It somehow comes back to chicken fucking, Mike. What the hell?
I know.
It's always chicken fucking.
How does this keep happening?
But there was a bunch of stuff in that made it into Crooked Little Vein. So there was I forget what it is, but the people who fetishize giant lizards. Oh yeah. Basically fetishize Godzilla. That was in Bad World, but it also showed up, obviously, as you know, a Crooked Little Vein. And the saline injections, if I'm not mistaken, there was something about saline injections in one of those comics that he did. That, of course, was that whole sequence in Crooked Little Vein.
Yeah. There's a lot of that. Yeah, and I won't get into it now, but I read the story about how he did his research by meeting people who were doing that and in real life. He wasn't just reading about it, but he actually went and met them.
Oh wow!
The best way.
It was people who were using saline injections as temporary body modification, like creating patterns under their skin or whatever. But of course, it always gets sexual and gross.
Of course.
That's that internet rule. Which one is it, Mike? You always know the internet rule.
Rule 34.
Yeah, exactly.
If you can think it, porn exists of it.
Exactly.
Yep. True. One more thing that I did want to mention. So a pattern that we all kind of had is we kind of seem to fall out of our fandoms around our teenage years, when we're courting and meeting people and you're getting comfortable with people. And then, once you start kind of dating somebody and you really have that connection stuff, you start being like, oh yeah, I'm obsessed with this thing. Or of course they're going to notice it, around and stuff. It's not as easy to hide when you're dating and stuff. And I think it's funny how everybody's a nerd about something. Everybody has something they're nerd about. Even sports, they're sports nerds. Josh, you were mentioning you didn't think of that before, but now you kind of see it's just the same thing. They're obsessed like we are. It's just a different thing. So one of the things that my partner Travis was really big about is cars. He's a really big car guy. He was a mechanic for a long time. He likes to, work with his hands and build stuff. So I started going to car shows, which is, something I was not too interested in or whatever, but there's two cars that I've seen that I always get excited for. So now I'm excited to go to car shows because I'm yeah, I might see him again. And when I tell you guys are totally going to know why, and it's totally my nerd coming out. So the first one is the Corvette Stingray.
Oh yeah,
which is
even
what
I
the
know that.
Batmobile was based on. Yeah.
Mhm.
So anytime I could see one of those, like, and I remember when I first saw it, I didn't know that, but I was looking at it, I was like, what the fuck, the Batmobile? Just like, like looking at it, and then I found out later that it's based on, I was like, all right, that makes sense. And the other one was a VW Thing in orange. So it's
Oh,
a
okay.
big, blocky
wow.
Jeep, and it's called the Thing.
that
And
looks so
I've
cool.
seen one in orange. Yeah.
I just Googled it. Like, that looks awesome.
Yep. Yeah. Because it
So I'm
looks like
looking at it right now too. Yeah.
For some reason, I feel like this would be in like an episode of like, Scooby Doo, where they like go to the beach. Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Like,
Totally. Totally.
That's
It's
freaking
funny
awesome.
that like we can find our nerdum in other people's nerdum too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Like really cool.
that's
Well,
really
that's-
cool.
Yeah, that's like, Josh, you've talked about this countless times with Count Creepyhead, where it's like you don't collect toys, but because you're hearing people talk passionately about something that they enjoy, like you also get kind of intrigued and end up listen or at least knowing stuff about it because you're intrigued by their fandoms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like, yeah, and that's true. And I've mentioned that in several episodes. That's true of a lot of things. I've mentioned how many books I've read about mountain climbing before, and it's like
Mhm.
I don't give a fuck about mountain climbing, but when people talk about the things that they obsess about, yeah, I love it. Whether it's marathon racing or even sports. I read a whole book on an airplane once about how people make baseballs, like how they're constructed and the history of it and why they're designed that way, and
Mhm.
where the materials come from. And like, it sounds boring, but I was super fascinated because I'm like, you never think to ask that, like, what the fuck are those little red stitches for? Why is it in that weird shape? And like, there's a whole huge story. And when you read somebody or watch somebody or listen to somebody who tells you that story, but they're able to do it from this perspective of being a fan, and they're excited and they're really into it and passionate, and they want you to be as passionate as they are, and it's like you can't help but kind of get the bug a little bit.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, totally.
I was saying, and I think that that's just a great summation of what we're talking about here, right? The whole idea was, what was it when you were a kid? What person or thing did somebody tell you about that where they were so excited that you had to check it out, and when you
Mhm.
did, you were like, oh well, shit, yeah, like
Yep.
this is for me, and
Absolutely.
Because you never know what you're going to be into until you get exposed to it. So that's the great point of like having conversations with so many people and bringing in so many people into your group, because then you're
Mhm.
seeing all these different perspectives and all these different things that might be your favorite thing next week. You don't know.
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely. Like when I worked at Media Play, I didn't have a huge musical knowledge when I started working there. Like I knew the bands that I liked. I liked, I was a teenager when I was working there, so it's like I liked Green Day, liked The Offspring. There's like handful of '90s bands, but there was nothing that I was like super super into. When I started working with all of these like different like all these different people who are interested in different types of music, I started trading CDs with people, and like that's when I started getting into all sorts of musical genres. And some of my favorite albums came out of talking to other people about their music, and learning like, oh, well, I've never heard this band. Let me check them out, and just falling in love with that music. So, and that happened again and again throughout my life, not just with music, but like with film, with books, with comics, and hell, even some toys. Like I shit you not, I never thought that I would spend like a large amount of money on building brick toys, like Mega Construx, Lego, whatever.
Yeah.
But Josh Hibbard, started building this freaking Lego city, and it was amazing. And so they're like, I want to play with Legos too. So it's like I started buying.
I have
Legos.
Monster High Legos.
Yeah, we actually have some
Nice.
of those as well.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
they're fun.
But yeah, it's like you meet new people and they introduce you to these crazy crazy passions that they have, and it's like, ooh, I want to try that.
And Sam, you mentioned getting into comics in a really heavy way later on, like after you had already been hanging out with Mike, and it was like the era of Walking Dead or The Boys or whatever. So, it would have been like the late 2000s, 2010, something like that. So you're already
early 2000s.
There you go. But you're already
Yeah.
an adult. You're already into other things, and it's sometimes funny how people find fandoms later on in life. It's like you eventually come across the thing, because we talk about how we got into stuff when we were kids, mostly, or maybe young adults. Like I didn't get into listening to heavy music until I was probably 18, right? 18 or 19, which now I listen to mostly heavy music, but still I was still young. But like my wife is a perfect example. She's really, really into plants, right? She's got plants all over the house, house plants and flowering plants, and whatever. That's her thing. They're decorations, and they're like little pets, and she
Her and
loves
Travis are so much alike.
Yeah, they really are. And I have so many places in my house. Like right now I can look out the doorway and there's a vine hanging down from the second story, and she loves that. She loves when there's plants that grow all over the house on their own with like creepers and vines. But that didn't happen until we moved into the house we live in now, where we moved in here in 2019. So we've been married for more than, or almost 20 years now, and all this time I've been a comic book fan. And she's talked about, like, it'd be fun to have a hobby, something I can do on the side. But there was never really anything that really caught her interest until, for some reason, a couple of years ago, she got a plant, and then another plant, and another plant. And before you know it, like I'll go to the store and be like, well, I didn't mean to stop at Half Price Books on the way home, but they had the discount rack updated, with all the comics. Like, I didn't mean to buy comics today. They were just there. And, now, again, she'll go to the grocery store, and she was like, well, the nursery's on the way home. What am I supposed to do? Not stop? Gee.
Yep.
I mean, to be fair, that's me anytime I go into a department store like Walmart or Target. I'm like, well, I gotta look at the toys. Come on.
There was us. We were talking earlier about, because right now I'm going through that program to change careers and stuff, and we're hoping a lot of business comes in the store because I'm going without a paycheck for a little while. And I was like, well, you did just buy a lot of plants, like saying to Travis, and he's like, yeah, but look at my garden. It's beautiful. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. It is.
Exactly. Look at my wall of comics. It's beautiful. I have a wall.
Yeah.
Oh, man. So, like I said, this is not one of our improv episodes, and we typically like to try to keep these a little bit shorter, but I think this is an awesome place to stop. I think we've kind of gone full circle around where we started and, where we ended up as adults. And yeah, this has just been fun. There's been no real point to the episode other than just to enjoy going down memory lane a little bit and sharing some stories. And we hope anyone listening has similar stories or better ones that you can tell us about. So yeah, leave us a comment, leave us a rating, whatever you want, and let us know what you think about your own fandom and how you got into it. We would love to hear. But before we sign off, Sam, do you want to share anything, any plugs for Jerry's Closet or anything else you're doing these days?
Yes. So Jerry's Closet opens Saturdays and Sundays, 9 to 4 in the East Aurora Flea Market. Just take the 400, get off at East Aurora, and it's right down across from the Dollar General. We're going to be doing Metal Fest July 29th. That's at Rapids Theater. And then July 28th, there's a pre-party for Metal Fest at Buffalo Saloon. I'm pretty sure that's it. Check our social media just in case it's not, but I'm pretty sure that's it. But they're going to do a basket raffle. There's a meet and greet with the bands. Kind of get to hang out with some of the other vendors before Metal Fest. And then I'm doing a event in August 19th and 20th in Rochester for Adult Wave, it's called, and it's a cannabis and adult entertainment and magazines, comics, all adult themed. So we'll be there with our Deep in Jerry's Closet catalog, which you can get on Big Cartel.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing. We hope everyone checks out that event or those events. And yeah, everyone go visit Jerry's Closet if you're in Western New York. Make the trip. It will be worth it.
I still want to get down there. It's like working nights is a plague, man. It sucks. Damn it, I want to get down there because I'm so jealous of all the stuff that Omei keeps showing. I'm like, I gotta go over and look.
If I can get them to open the doors earlier, I could get you in there right after work. But sometimes the guy's not there till like 8, and it's like, that's right past that sweet spot,
Yeah, because then I'll be driving home all half asleep, like,
I could take you to breakfast.
True. I gotta.
But I know your schedule's crazy, so don't feel pressured or anything. We'll figure it out at some time.
Yeah, it's just that ever since becoming a dad, having to pick up the kiddo from school, I got that sweet spot sleep schedule where it's like I'm out before 8 a.m. and up usually by 2. So.
Yep.
But
and that's needed. You need that schedule, especially to be able to function properly.
Right. So yeah, by the time this episode comes out, this will already have passed. But I have a comic convention this weekend that I've been working very diligently on trying to get pieces ready for. Unfortunately, I had a few printing snafus, so I'm hoping that I can still move enough product to make back my cost. But I also Boogeyman's Closet, as always, I'm running that. And we are moving into our month of Wrong Place, Wrong Time films, which is a very odd collection of films. And our one of our first episodes, you will hear another familiar voice from this episode.
Oh, again, I wonder who that could be.
Oh, Metal Fest will also have Mike Alvarez artwork. Woo. So if you are looking for Mike Alvarez artwork, it will be at Metal Fest.
Woo. And you recently put out the Cabin Fever episode of Boogeyman's Closet as of this recording, and I love that movie. I was bummed that I wasn't able to come and be the guest star on it, because that's one of the movies that I kind of had in my head of like, oh, if he ever does this, I got to be on the episode. But it was really, really cool to hear Brian and Corey come on from So It's Come to This, a Simpsons family podcast.
I had a lot of fun with, because I know Brian is not a horror fan. Like he's joined us for World's End and for What We Do in the Shadows, which are both comedies, but they have horror elements to them. So to have him on like a body horror movie, I thought that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely. That was a good episode too. So yeah, everyone check out the Boogeyman's Closet. Check out Count Creepyhead's Saturday Morning Monster Mash. Check out Jerry's Closet. All the other things, Metal Fest, everything that we've shared.
They are all fantastic.
And with that, we'll just go ahead and wrap it up. I have one more thing to say. We're going to plug our own show, which is to say thanks to the fans for sticking around with us for 49 goddamn episodes. The very next episode you hear will be our big 50th episode special. And I will make the announcement right here. You've heard it first. Mike mentioned it a little bit on the most recent episode of Count Creepyhead, but our next episode will be, of course, it's summertime, and we're going to return to Slasher Camp. We'll be checking in with Freddie and Jason to see how they're doing running their sleepaway camp. And there just might be a special visitor to the camp this year. Who's it going to be? We'll find out. But you'll have to keep listening, so keep us in your subscription feed. Thanks to everyone for tuning into the Raised by Rentals program. If you had fun with us, let us know. Drop us a line on the socials. Visit us. Give us a comment. Tell us your secret origin story. And with that, I'm Josh.
I'm Mike.
I'm Sam.
And we have to return some videotapes. Raised by Rentals is a member of the Rad Pantheon Network. Visit radpantheon.com to support rad stuff. The theme music is Forbidden Fruit by Velvet Bethany. You can purchase music and learn more at velvetbethany.com.
Oh no.
Oh no.